the wake-up call. Most people spend more time planning a 2-week vacation than planning 30 years of retirement, and then they wonder why they're eating cat food at 72. I'm Ray Dalio. I've spent 5 decades studying patterns, markets, economies, human behavior, and here's what I've learned. Brilliance in one area doesn't transfer to another. I've watched doctors who can diagnose rare diseases but can't diagnose their own financial death spiral. Engineers who build bridges but can't build a retirement plan that doesn't collapse. Executives who run billion-dollar companies but run their personal finances like a drunk teenager with a credit card. These aren't dumb people. They're just treating the most important 30-year period of their lives like an afterthought. And your 30s? That's the inflection point. That's where compound interest becomes your religion or your regret. Let me be brutally clear. If you're in your 30s right now, you're standing at the only moment where time is still massively on your side. Not kind of on your side, not somewhat helpful, massively, exponentially, mathematically undeniable. But most 30-somethings are living like they have infinite runway. You get that promotion. You upgrade the apartment. You get that bonus. You upgrade the car. You get that raise. You upgrade the lifestyle. And your future self, that person at 65, they're starving while your current self feasts. I built my entire life on a principle, radical truth and radical transparency. So here's a radical truth. You're probably screwing this up right now. Not because you're lazy, not because you don't care, but because you're trapped in 2 cognitive prisons that destroy retirement plans. Prison number 1, present bias. Your brain feels rich when money hits your account. It feels poor when you think about saving. So you spend on what feels good now: dinners, trips, subscriptions, stuff, and tell yourself you'll save more later. But later never comes. Because later you'll have new expenses, new wants, new justifications. Prison number 2, the income illusion. You think, I'm making $75K now, but I'll make $150K in my 40s, so I'll just save more then. Wrong. Dead wrong. Because when you make $150K, you'll be living a $150K lifestyle. Bigger house, private schools, country club, and you'll have the same damn problem, just with bigger numbers and less time to fix it. Here's what nobody tells you. More income doesn't solve bad financial behavior. It just makes the math more expensive. I've seen people making $500K a year who are effectively broke. Leverage to their eyeballs, no margin, no freedom, just a more expensive hamster wheel. So what are the 3 moves? The 3 decisions that separate a stress-free retirement from a nightmare? The first one pisses people off because it requires you to admit something uncomfortable about yourself. Automate your wealth before you see it move. Number 1, pay yourself first through ruthless automation. And I don't mean budgeting. Budgets fail. They fail because they rely on willpower. And willpower is a finite resource that gets depleted by Tuesday afternoon, when your coworker asks if you want to grab lunch. Here's what I learned early. You cannot trust your future self to make the right decision. Your future self is tired, stressed, tempted. Your future self sees money in the checking account and thinks, I can afford this. So you remove the decision entirely. You automate. The day your paycheck hits, before you see it, before you touch it, before your brain registers it as yours, 20% disappears into retirement accounts. Gone. Invisible. You can't spend what you can't see. It's the financial equivalent of not keeping cookies in the house. If the cookies aren't there, you can't eat them at 11 p.m. when your discipline is shot. I structured my entire financial life this way decades ago. Automatic transfers. The moment income hit, before lifestyle creep could sink its teeth in. And here's the thing. After 2 months, you don't even notice. Your brain adapts to living on 80% of your income. You find ways to make it work. You cut the subscriptions you forgot you had. You cook twice a week instead of ordering out 5 times. You realize that most of what you were spending money on wasn't actually making you happier. It was just filling space. But most people don't do this. They use what I call the leftover method. They spend on rent, groceries, utilities, fun, random stuff, and then save whatever's left. You know what's left at the end of the month? Nothing. There's never anything left, because expenses expand to fill available cash. It's Parkinson's law, but for your bank account. Let me show you what this looks like in practice. Two people, both 32 years old, both making $80K a year. Person A automates 20% into their 401K and Roth IRA. That's $16,000 a year. They never see it. They live on the remaining $64,000. Person B tries their best. They save when they can. They have good intentions. Some months they save $500. Other months, zero. Average maybe $6,000 a year. Fast forward 25 years. They're both 57. Person A, assuming a conservative 8% average return, has $1.3 million. Person B has $140,000. Same starting income, same intelligence, same opportunities. The only difference, one automated, one didn't. And that difference is $1.16 million. That's not a rounding error. That's the difference between retiring at 60 and working until you're 75. That's the difference between living in comfort and living in fear. Here's the painful part. Person B wasn't irresponsible. They saved when they could. They had good months. But good intentions and, when I can, are the enemy of wealth building. Your brain will always find a reason why this month is different. Car repair, birthday gift, work trip, holiday, unexpected expense. There's always something, so you automate and you make it non-negotiable. Treat your retirement contribution like rent. You don't skip rent because you want to go out this weekend. You don't negotiate with your landlord about paying half this month. You pay it, period. Your future self is your landlord, and that landlord doesn't accept excuses. But here's where most people screw up automation. They automate the wrong amount into the wrong places. They set up a transfer of $200 a month into a savings account, earning 0.5% interest, and think they're winning. They're not. They're losing to inflation while feeling productive. Automation is the mechanism, but automation alone isn't enough. Because most people automate into the wrong vehicles, and that's where move number 2 separates the comfortable from the desperate. Max out tax-advantaged accounts, like your life depends on it. Move number 2, max out tax-advantaged accounts like your life depends on it. Because it does. Here's what most people don't understand. Saving and strategic saving are completely different games. One builds wealth. The other builds the illusion of wealth while the government quietly takes a third of everything you earn. I'm talking about 401K, Roth IRAs, HSAs. These aren't just nice options. They're compounding accelerators. They're the difference between working until 67 and retiring at 55. Let me explain why taxes are the silent wealth killer nobody talks about. You make money. You pay income tax. You invest what's left. Your investments grow. You pay capital gains tax. You sell to fund retirement. You pay tax again on withdrawals. 3 separate tax events, all eating into your future. Now here's the alternative. You contribute to a traditional 401K. That money is pre-tax. You don't pay income tax on it now. It grows for 30 years. No capital gains tax during growth. You withdraw it in retirement, and yes, you pay income tax then, but you're likely in a lower bracket because you're not earning a salary anymore. Or you go Roth. You pay tax now, but everything, growth, withdrawals, all of it, is completely tax-free forever. Let me show you what this looks like with real numbers. Two 33-year-olds. Both contribute $500 a month for 30 years. Person A uses a taxable brokerage account. Person B uses a Roth IRA. Same contributions, same investments, same 9% average return. Person A ends up with about $780,000. but they owe capital gains tax on the growth roughly 15 to 20%, depending on their state. After taxes, they're looking at around $650,000 in actual spendable money. Person B ends up with $900,000, and they owe exactly $0 in taxes. Not on the growth, not on withdrawal. That's $250,000 more for doing the exact same thing, just using the right vehicle. $250,000. That's not a strategy. That's a requirement. But here's the excuse I hear constantly. I'll do it when I make more money. That's a lie you tell yourself. And it's expensive. Because when you make more money, you'll be in a higher tax bracket. So you're not postponing the decision. You're postponing it into a worse situation. You're saying, I'll start saving strategically when it's even more painful to do so. That makes zero sense. Your 30s are when your income is growing, but your tax bracket is still manageable. This is your window. The HSA? Even better. It's the only account with triple tax benefits. Contributions are pre-tax. Growth is tax-free. Withdrawals for medical expenses are tax-free. And after 65, you can use it for anything. It just becomes a traditional IRA. Medical expenses in retirement are one of the biggest wealth destroyers. The average couple needs $315,000 just for health care after they stop working. You fund an HSA in your 30s, max it out every year, invest it aggressively, and let it grow for 30 years? You've just handled one of the scariest retirement costs without touching your other accounts. But most people use their HSA like a checking account. They max it out, then immediately spend it on doctor visits and prescriptions. They're using it as a rebate card, not a wealth-building tool. That's like buying a Ferrari and only driving it to the grocery store. Here's what I did. I maxed out every tax-advantaged account available. Every year. No exceptions. Even years when it hurt. Even years when I wanted to buy something else. Because I understood something most people don't. The wealthy obsess over tax efficiency. The middle class ignores it. And that's exactly why the middle class stays middle class. I've watched people work 40-hour weeks for 40 years and hand over 30% of their gains to the government. Not because they had to, but because they didn't know better. That's not taxation. That's volunteer donation. You want to know the real difference between wealthy people and everyone else? It's not income. Plenty of high earners are broke. It's not intelligence. Plenty of smart people are financially illiterate. It's this. Wealthy people structure their finances to keep more of what they earn. Poor people and middle-class people structure their finances around convenience and instant gratification. Tax advantage accounts are inconvenient. There are contribution limits, withdrawal restrictions, penalties for early access. But those restrictions are features, not bugs. They force you to leave the money alone. They protect you from your worst impulses. They create a moat between your current self and your future wealth. And your current self, the one who wants a new watch or a weekend trip, can't touch it. But here's where most people screw up both move number 1 and move 2. They automate aggressively. They use the right accounts. They check all the boxes. And they still end up broke because they completely misunderstand move 2. Move 2 to invest for growth, not safety. Your 30s are your risk window. Move number 3, invest for growth, not safety. Your 30s are your risk window, and most people slam it shut out of fear. Let me tell you what I see all the time. Someone finally gets serious about retirement. They automate their savings. They max out their 401k and Roth IRA. They feel good, responsible, adult. Then they make the worst possible decision. They invest it all in safe assets, bonds, CDs, money market accounts. They think they're protecting their future. They're actually destroying it. Here's the brutal math. Inflation runs at roughly 2 and 3% per year. Sometimes higher, rarely lower. It's a silent thief that steals your purchasing power while you sleep. You put your money in a safe savings account earning 1%. You feel secure. But inflation is running at 3%. You're not earning 1%. You're losing 2% every single year. You're on a treadmill that's moving backward. You're running as hard as you can and still losing ground. I call this the illusion of safety. It feels safe because the number in your account doesn't go down, but the value, the actual purchasing power, is eroding constantly. Let me show you what this looks like over 30 years. You save $1,000 a month in a safe account, earning 2% annually. After 30 years, you have $520,000. Sounds decent, right? Wrong. Because inflation averaged 3% over that same period. The purchasing power of that $520,000 is actually equivalent to about $215,000 in today's dollars. You saved for 30 years and ended up with less than half the value you thought you had. Now let's run the same scenario with a growth-oriented approach. Same $1,000 a month, but invested in a diversified portfolio of index funds averaging 10% annually. After 30 years, you have $2.2 million. Even after adjusting for that same 3% inflation, you're looking at roughly $900,000 in today's purchasing power. Same effort, same discipline, same monthly contribution. But one approach gives you 4 times the real wealth. 4 times. It's not a marginal difference. That's the difference between a comfortable retirement and a desperate one. Here's the principle I've lived by my entire career. Your 30s are your highest risk tolerance decade. Not because you're reckless, but because you have time. You have 30 plus years until retirement. If the market crashes tomorrow, and it will crash multiple times between now and then, you have 3 decades to recover. You don't need the money next year. You don't need it in 5 years. You need it in 30 years. So short-term volatility is irrelevant. It's noise. But people in their 30s make the same mistake as people in their 60s. They invest like they need the money tomorrow. They panic when the market drops 10%. They sell at the bottom. They miss the recovery. And they lock in losses that didn't need to exist. I've watched this happen in every major downturn. Smart people, doctors, lawyers, engineers pulling everything out when the market tanks. They felt like they were protecting themselves. They were actually committing financial suicide. Because here's what always happens. The market recovers. It doesn't recover in a straight line. It doesn't happen overnight. But it always recovers. And the people who stayed in, who kept buying during the crash, they're the ones who build generational wealth. Let me tell you about 2008. The S&P 500 dropped 57% from peak to trough. People lost their minds. They sold everything and went to cash. They felt smart, safe, prudent. Meanwhile, people who kept contributing to their 401k during the crash were buying stocks at a 50% discount. By 2013, the market had fully recovered. By 2020, it had more than tripled from the 2009 bottom. The people who sold, they missed the entire recovery. The people who stayed in, they retired early. Same crash, completely different outcomes. Here's the uncomfortable truth. If you're in your 30s and you're not invested at least 80-90% in equities, you're not being conservative. You're being reckless with your future, because the safe choice now guarantees you'll run out of money later. You'll hit 70 and realize you need twice as much saved as you actually have, and at that point, there's no time to fix it. You can't go back and take more risk in your 30s. You can't redo the last 30 years with a different strategy. You're just stuck with the consequences of choosing comfort over growth. I learned this principle from watching patterns across decades. Risk and reward are inseparable. You can't have security in retirement without accepting volatility now. You can't have growth without stomaching the downturns. The market doesn't reward you for playing it safe. It rewards you for staying in the game when everyone else is running for the exits. But growth investing in your 30s only works if you avoid the psychological traps that make smart people do catastrophically dumb things with their money. The psychological traps that kill these 3 moves. You can know all 3 moves. You can understand the math. You can even set everything up perfectly, and you'll still fail. Because knowing what to do isn't the problem. Doing it consistently for 30 years, that's where people break. Let me tell you about the 3 psychological enemies that destroy retirement plans. Enemy number 1, lifestyle inflation. This is the silent killer. You get a raise. You upgrade your life. You get a bonus. You upgrade again, and every single upgrade feels justified in the moment. I work hard. I deserve this. I'm making more now. I can afford it. It's not that much more expensive. But here's what's really happening. You're locking in a higher baseline of spending. That nicer apartment? You now need to make $2,000 a month just to maintain it. That car payment? You're committed for 5 years. Those private school tuitions? You just added $30,000 a year in fixed costs. Every upgrade is a financial anchor, and the more anchors you add, the less freedom you have. I've seen lawyers making $250,000 a year who are effectively broke. Not because they're stupid, not because they don't earn enough, but because they're spending $255,000. They upgraded to the big house in the right neighborhood. They bought the luxury cars because everyone at the firm drives one. They joined the country club because that's where clients are, and now they're trapped. They can't save because their lifestyle requires every dollar they make. They can't take a lower stress job because they need the income. They can't retire early because they built a life that costs $500,000 a year to maintain. This is the trap. Every lifestyle upgrade feels good for about 3 months. It's called the hedonic treadmill. You get the new car. You feel amazing for 90 days. Then it's just your car. The thrill is gone. And now you're stuck with an $800 monthly payment for something that no longer makes you happy. Here's what I did differently. I locked my lifestyle at my early 30s income level. Every raise after that, straight into investments. Every bonus, retirement accounts. I didn't upgrade my life just because I could afford to, because I understood that every upgrade is a decision to delay retirement. You want the nicer house? That's fine. Just know it costs you 3 more years of working. You want the luxury car? Great. That's 2 years of your life you just traded. Most people make these trades unconsciously. They never do the math. They never ask, is this upgrade worth working an extra year? They just spend because the money is there. Enemy number 2, social comparison. Your coworker buys a new car. You feel behind. Your college friend posts vacation photos from Bali. You feel like you're missing out. Your neighbor renovates their kitchen. Your kitchen suddenly feels inadequate. This is the poison of comparison. And it's everywhere. Social media has turned it into a 24/7 assault on your financial discipline. Everyone is showing you their highlight reel. Nobody posts about their debt, their stress, their regret. They post the vacation, not the credit card statement. They post the new house, not the 30-year mortgage that keeps them up at night. And your brain sees all of this and whispers, you're falling behind. So you spend to keep up. You buy things you don't need with money you don't have to impress people you don't even like. And you do it because the alternative living below your means, while your peers live large feels like losing. But here's the truth. Most of those people are broke. They're living paycheck to paycheck at 6-figure incomes. They're one emergency away from financial collapse. They look rich. They feel successful. But they're building a house of cards that will collapse the moment their income stops. You're not competing with them. You're competing with your future self, and your future self is begging you to stop caring what other people think. Enemy number 3, loss aversion. This is the trap that ruins growth investing. The market drops 15%. You panic. You see your account balance fall. It feels like you're losing money. So you sell. You move everything to cash. You tell yourself you'll get back in when things stabilize. But things never feel stable at the bottom. Fear feels like wisdom in the moment. Panic feels like prudence. And you miss the recovery. Here's what behavioral science has proven. Humans feel losses twice as strongly as gains. Losing $10,000 hurts more than gaining $10,000 feels good. So when the market drops, the pain is intense and immediate. When it rises, the pleasure is muted and forgettable. This asymmetry destroys long-term wealth because investing requires you to endure short-term pain for long-term gain. It requires you to hold through the crashes, to keep buying when everything feels like it's falling apart, to trust the math even when your emotions are screaming at you to run. I've lived through multiple market crashes. I've watched my portfolio drop 30%, 40%, 50%. And every time, the fear is real. The uncertainty is real. But the principle is also real. Markets recover. They always have. And the people who stay disciplined through the chaos are the ones who retire rich. The people who react emotionally, they lock in losses and miss the rebound. So here's the antidote to these three enemies: self-awareness and systems. You can't eliminate emotions, but you can build systems that protect you from your own worst instincts. Automate your savings so lifestyle inflation can't touch it. Delete social media if comparison is killing your discipline. Set rules for investing like never sell in a downturn and commit to them in writing before the next crash. Because the next crash is coming. I don't know when, nobody does, but it's coming. And when it does, you'll be tested. Your discipline will be tested. Your commitment to these three moves will be tested. And most people will fail that test. But you don't have to. So you've got the three moves. You know the traps. But there's one final truth most financial advice won't tell you, and it's the difference between retiring comfortable and retiring rich. The uncomfortable truth: retirement isn't about money, it's about meaning. Here's what nobody tells you about retirement: the math only gets you halfway. I've watched people with $5 million saved fall apart within 2 years of retiring, not because they ran out of money, but because they ran out of purpose. They spent 30 years building wealth and 0 time building a life worth retiring into. And when the paycheck stopped, when the title disappeared, when the office was gone, they had nothing, no identity, no meaning, no reason to get out of bed. This isn't soft advice, this is a warning, because I've seen it destroy people who did everything right financially. They automated, they maxed out their accounts, they invested aggressively, they hit 60 with more money than they'd ever need, and they were miserable. Here's why. Most people tie their self-worth to their career, to their income, to their status, to what they do for a living. I'm a doctor. I'm a lawyer. I'm an executive. That's not what you do. That's who you think you are. And when you retire, that identity evaporates. You're not a doctor anymore. You're a retiree. You're not an executive. You're someone with nothing to execute. And if your entire sense of self was wrapped up in that title, you're left with a terrifying question: who am I now? I've watched brilliant, accomplished people spiral into depression within months of retirement because they built a life that required a $300,000 a year lifestyle to feel meaningful. The luxury, the status, the recognition. And even though they saved enough to maintain that lifestyle financially, it doesn't work in retirement because the country club isn't impressed by what you used to do. The expensive restaurants don't care about your former title. And that dopamine hit you got from closing deals, from solving problems, from being important, it's gone. You're chasing the same feelings with money, but money can't recreate purpose. Here's the contrast. I know people who retired on far less, $1 million, sometimes less, and they're thriving. Not because they have enough money. They're actually living on much tighter budgets than the miserable millionaires. But because they built simple, meaningful lives in their 30s and 40s. They cultivated hobbies that had nothing to do with income. They built relationships that weren't transactional. They found purpose outside of their paycheck. So when they retired, it wasn't a loss, it was a transition. They didn't lose their identity. They just shifted how they spent their time. This is the part of retirement planning that nobody talks about. You're not just building a retirement fund, you're building a life worth retiring into. And if you don't start that work now in your 30s, you'll hit 60 and realize you have no idea what you actually want. Let me ask you something. What do you want your life to look like at 65? Not financially, not theoretically. Actually, what will you do on a Tuesday morning when you have nowhere to be? What will make you feel alive when you're not solving problems for money? What will give you purpose when nobody needs your expertise anymore? Most people can't answer that because they've never thought about it. They're so focused on making money and climbing the ladder that they forget to ask why they're climbing. And when they reach the top, they realize the view is empty. Here's what I've learned. Retirement isn't about having enough money to stop working. It's about having a life so fulfilling that work becomes optional. The 3 money moves I've given you will handle the financial side, but you need to start working on the other side now. Not later, not when you have time, now. In your 30s, while you're still building your career, you also need to be building the things that will matter when the career ends. Relationships. Not network and contacts, real relationships with people you'd spend time with, even if it didn't benefit your career. Hobbies. Not productivity hacks or side hustles, actual activities you do because they bring you joy, not because they generate income. Purpose. Not job titles or promotions, a reason to exist that transcends what you're paid to do. This is hard because it requires you to invest time and energy into things that don't show immediate returns. Your retirement account grows visibly. You can track it. Your sense of purpose, that grows invisibly. You can't put it on a spreadsheet, but it's just as critical, maybe more, because I've never met someone who regretted having strong relationships and a meaningful life. But I've met plenty of people who regret sacrificing everything for a career that eventually ended. Here's the uncomfortable question you need to ask yourself right now. If you build a life that requires $300,000 a year to feel alive, have you actually won? Or have you just built a very expensive prison? Because even if you save enough to afford it, you're still trapped. You're dependent on maintaining that lifestyle to feel okay. You can't downsize. You can't simplify. You can't adapt. You're stuck chasing the same dopamine hits forever. That's not freedom. That's an expensive addiction. Real freedom is building a life that you love that doesn't cost a fortune to maintain, where your happiness isn't tied to consumption, where your identity isn't tied to status, where your purpose isn't tied to productivity. The 3 money moves will buy you options, but only you can decide what those options are worth. Only you can build a life that makes retirement feel like liberation instead of loss. And that work starts now, not in your 50s when you're closer to retirement, not when you have more time, now. In your 30s, while you still have the energy and flexibility to figure out who you are beyond your job title. The final question isn't whether you can retire stress-free. It's whether you'll have the courage to live differently starting today. The final question, will you actually do this? Let me be honest with you. Most people reading this will do absolutely nothing. They'll nod along. They'll feel motivated. They'll think, yeah, I need to do this. And then 48 hours from now, they'll be back to their default patterns, spending like they always have, saving like they always have, which is barely at all, telling themselves they'll start next month, next year. When things settle down, I've studied human behavior for 5 decades, and here's what I know. Behavior change is exponentially harder than knowledge acquisition. You now know the 3 moves. Automate your wealth before you see it. Max out tax-advantaged accounts like your life depends on it. Invest for growth, not safety. Your 30s are your risk window. The information isn't complex. A 12-year-old could understand it, but implementation, that's where 90% of people fail. Because these 3 moves require something most people aren't willing to give, short-term discomfort for long-term freedom. They require you to admit you've been doing it wrong, and admission feels like failure. They require you to live below your means while your peers live large, and restraint feels like losing. They require you to endure market crashes without panicking, and discipline feels impossible when fear takes over. So let me ask you directly, will you actually do this? Not, do you want to? Not, does it make sense? Will you? Because wanting to change and actually changing are separated by a chasm most people never cross. Here's why people don't change. It's easier to keep doing what you're doing. Your current spending habits feel normal. Your current lifestyle feels necessary. Your current financial trajectory feels inevitable. Change feels extreme. Automating 20% of your income feels impossible when you're barely making it on 100%. Maxing out retirement accounts feels crazy when you have expenses. Staying invested during a crash feels reckless when everyone around you is panicking, so you justify staying the same. I'll save more when I make more. I'll get serious about this later. My situation is different, but your situation isn't different. The math is the math. Compound interest doesn't care about your excuses. Time doesn't wait for you to feel ready. And every year you delay is a year you can never get back. I built my entire philosophy on two principles: radical truth and radical transparency. So here's a radical truth. Look at your current financial trajectory honestly. If you don't change course in your 30s, where will you be at 65? Run the numbers. Don't guess. Calculate. Take your current savings rate, your current investment returns, your current spending habits. Project them forward 30 years. What do you see? For most people, the answer is terrifying. They see themselves working into their 70s. They see themselves dependent on Social Security, which might not even exist in its current form. They see themselves one medical emergency away from bankruptcy, and yet they still won't change, because changing requires confronting an uncomfortable truth. You've been wrong. You've been spending money on things that don't matter. You've been prioritizing comfort now over security later. You've been living like you have infinite time, and you don't. That realization hurts, so most people avoid it. They distract themselves. They rationalize. They tell themselves it'll work out somehow. But hope is not a strategy, and denial doesn't change mathematics. Here's what I want you to understand. You're standing at a fork in the road. One path is easy now, brutal later. You keep spending. You keep delaying. You keep telling yourself you'll figure it out. And at 65, you're broke, exhausted, and out of options. The other path is hard now, effortless later. You cut your lifestyle. You automate aggressively. You endure the short-term pain. And at 65, you have freedom, security, and options. There's no middle ground. You don't get to have comfort now and security later without making sacrifices. The universe doesn't work that way. In the choice you make in your 30s this decade, these years determines which path you're on. Most people choose the first path, not explicitly. They'd never say, I'm choosing to be broke at 65. But implicitly, through 1,000 small decisions that prioritize today over tomorrow. The dinner out instead of cooking, the upgraded apartment instead of the cheaper one, the new car instead of keeping the old one running. Each decision seems small, insignificant, but they compound. Just like investments compound, so do bad financial decisions, and 30 years of small bad decisions equals catastrophic outcomes. Here's the final piece. Even if you do everything I've laid out, it won't feel good for years. You'll be automating 20% of your income while your coworker buys a new car. You'll be maxing out your Roth IRA while your friend goes to Cabo. You'll be holding through market crashes while everyone tells you you're crazy. And in those moments, you'll question yourself. You'll wonder if you're missing out. You'll feel like you're sacrificing too much. But here's what you need to remember. You're not sacrificing. You're choosing. You're choosing future freedom over present comfort. You're choosing long-term security over short-term dopamine. You're choosing to live like nobody else now, so you can live like nobody else later. And 10 years from now, when you look at your account balance and see 6 figures growing into 7, you'll thank yourself. 20 years from now, when your peers are panicking about retirement and you're not, you'll thank yourself. 30 years from now, when you retire early and they can't, you'll thank yourself. Or you won't, because you didn't do it. You read this, you understood it, you agreed with it, and then you did nothing. And 30 years from now, you'll hate yourself, not because you didn't know what to do, but because you knew and didn't do it anyway. There's no middle ground. You'll either thank yourself or hate yourself. The choice is yours, starting now.